The day Brennan Colworth told me I'd never amount to anything, I was on my hands and knees scrubbing coffee stains from his office carpet. 10 years later, I walked into that same building, not with cleaning supplies, but with a contract worth more than his entire quarterly revenue. He looked right through me during introductions, but I saw everything about him, just like I had that night when he made me feel smaller than the dirt under his shoes. Before we dive into this incredible journey, hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated. And subscribe, because what happens next will remind you why you should never let anyone else write your story. Stay until the end. This gets good. My name is Violet Monroe, and in 2008, my entire existence revolved around survival. I was 23, with a 3-year-old daughter named Naomi, living in a Detroit apartment where the heat only worked half the time, and the walls were so thin I could hear our neighbors' arguments word for word. I worked nights as a janitor at Colworth Investment Group, one of those steel and glass towers downtown where the lobby alone probably cost more than I'd earn in my lifetime. The pay was terrible, but it was steady, and steady meant Naomi could eat. Most people don't really see janitors. We're like ghosts who make messes disappear while everyone else sleeps. I'd push my cart through those executive offices, emptying trash cans full of half-eaten takeout that cost $50 a meal, wiping down desks where billion-dollar decisions happened. The executives would leave documents everywhere: merger proposals, investment strategies, acquisition plans. I started reading them during my breaks, not because I was nosy, but because I was curious. I'd been taking online business courses for 8 months, studying at 2 in the morning after my shift, dreaming about understanding their world. I loved learning how money moved, how businesses grew, how strategic decisions created value. In my mind, I'd analyze their deals, spot potential problems, imagine better solutions. It was fantasy, really. A janitor pretending she belonged in boardrooms instead of supply closets. But those fantasies kept me going through 12-hour shifts and a life that felt like it was suffocating me slowly. November 19th, 2008. I'll never forget that date because it's when my old life ended. I was cleaning Brennan Colworth's office around 11 at night. He was the founder and CEO, 52 years old, the kind of man who wore watches worth more than cars. I'd seen him plenty of times, always barking orders, always treating support staff like we were automated machines instead of people. His office was massive, with windows overlooking the entire city, like he owned every light below. I was vacuuming near his desk when the cord caught on something and yanked a stack of folders onto the floor. Papers went everywhere: confidential investment reports, client portfolios, documents marked with red stamps that screamed important. My heart stopped. I dropped down immediately, trying to gather everything, my hands shaking because I knew how bad this looked. That's when I heard the door open behind me, and his voice cut through the room like a blade. "What the hell are you doing with those?" I scrambled to my feet, papers clutched against my chest, words tumbling out. "Mr. Colworth, I'm so sorry. I accidentally knocked them over. I was just trying to put them back." He crossed the room in 4 long strides and snatched the folders from my hands, his face twisted with an anger that seemed way too big for the situation. He started flipping through them, like he was checking if I'd stolen something. And then he stopped. His eyes landed on one page, then flicked to me, then back to the page. These were organized by risk assessment rating. "You've mixed them up completely." Something desperate made me speak when I should have stayed quiet. "I can fix it. I know how they were organized. I can see the ratings in the corner of each page. If you give me 2 minutes, I'll reorganize them by descending risk level." The words came out before I could stop them, before I could remember that janitors weren't supposed to understand risk assessments. Brennan's face did something strange. His anger shifted into something else, something almost curious, but poisoned with contempt. "You can read these? You understand what risk assessment ratings mean?" My mouth went dry, but I nodded. "I'm taking business courses online. I've been studying investment fundamentals and portfolio management. For maybe 3 seconds, I thought he might be impressed. Maybe he'd see that I was trying to better myself, that I had ambition beyond pushing a mop. Instead, his lip curled into something ugly. Business courses. Online. He said it like the words tasted rotten. Let me tell you something about the real world. Something your little internet classes won't teach you. There's a reason you're cleaning my office instead of working in it. He moved back to his desk, settling into his leather chair like a king on a throne, and gestured at me like I was an exhibit in a museum. You think reading some documents and taking online courses makes you qualified to play in this world? This business requires pedigree, connections, elite education, and instincts you're born with, not lessons you learn from some discount website. People who succeed here come from families who've been building wealth for generations. They went to schools that cost more per year than you'll make in your lifetime. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood perfectly, but I stood there frozen, feeling my eyes burn with humiliation. He wasn't done. You seem like a hard worker, so I'll give you advice. Stop wasting time on fantasies. You have a daughter, right? I've seen the picture on your locker. Focus on being a good mother and doing your job well. There's dignity in knowing your limitations. Accept what you're capable of, and you'll be much happier. He gestured around his office, at the floor-to-ceiling windows and the mahogany furniture, and the view of a city he claimed as his kingdom. This isn't for people like you. It never will be. The worst part wasn't his words. The worst part was that some small, tired piece of me wondered if he was right. I took the folders, reorganized them in complete silence while he watched, and left that office with my vision blurred by tears I refused to let fall until I was in the stairwell. I sat on those concrete steps for 20 minutes, crying into my hands, feeling more lost than I'd ever felt. When I finally finished my shift at 6 in the morning, there was a note taped to my locker. Please see HR before leaving. I was fired by 6:15 for mishandling confidential materials. Just like that, my income disappeared. I remember driving home as the sun came up, thinking about how I'd tell Naomi we might lose our apartment, how I'd explain that Mommy made a mistake, and now things would be even harder. I felt crushed under the weight of my own worthlessness, ground down into nothing by a man who'd never even asked my name. But somewhere in that crushing weight, something else started to happen. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that burns out fast. The cold, steady kind that hardens into fuel. I took 4 jobs over the next 3 months. Overnight stock at a grocery store, morning shifts at a diner, afternoons doing data entry from home, weekends catering corporate events. I slept maybe 3 hours a night, and you saw Naomi mostly when she was sleeping. The guilt of that nearly broke me more than the exhaustion. But I kept studying, kept learning, kept absorbing everything I could about business operations and emerging technologies. During those catering gigs, serving drinks and appetizers to executives, I'd listen to them complain about their businesses. Supply chain disasters, inventory nightmares, logistics chaos, money bleeding out through operational inefficiencies they couldn't seem to fix. And I'd think, I could fix that. I could actually solve those problems. The ideas started forming during those long nights when I couldn't sleep anyway. What if someone created a system that used data analytics and early artificial intelligence to optimize supply chains before problems happened? What if you could predict disruptions, automate reordering, streamline logistics in ways that saved companies millions? I started sketching out frameworks, building models, teaching myself basic coding to see if my ideas could actually work. I had $900 saved. That was supposed to be my emergency fund, the money that would keep Naomi fed if everything fell apart. But I realized that not betting on myself was the real emergency. I spent $600 registering Violet Chain Solutions as a business and building a basic website. Then I started cold calling every small business in Detroit, pitching supply chain optimization services. I got rejected 143 times before someone said yes. Her name was Diana Okafor, and she owned a small manufacturing company making automotive parts. She was drowning in inventory costs and missed deliveries, losing contracts because she couldn't compete with larger suppliers. She gave me one chance because, as she said, "I'm desperate and you're hungry." Desperate plus hungry sometimes makes magic. I worked for her for free as the first month, just to prove my system worked. By month 2, I'd cut her inventory costs by 30%. By month 6, she'd saved $90,000 and was winning back contracts. She told her supplier network, and suddenly, I had 7 clients. The next 4 years were a war against sleep and normalcy. I hired 3 people, all of them folks who couldn't get hired anywhere else despite their talent. Rochelle had a disability that made traditional office work difficult. James had a criminal record from a nonviolent drug offense. Priya was a brilliant programmer who'd been rejected from tech companies for not having a degree. We worked from a tiny rented office that flooded when it rained, building software that actually worked while bigger companies were still figuring out what artificial intelligence meant. Our clients started seeing cost reductions of 35 to 45%. Word spread the way good news spreads in business, through whispers and referrals and people desperate for solutions. By 2012, we had 60 employees and $5 million in revenue. By 2014, we'd developed proprietary AI algorithms that could predict supply chain disruptions 3 months in advance. Venture capitalists started calling. Forbes wrote an article. We took a $15 million investment and expanded to 4 cities. I bought Naomi and myself a house in 2015. Nothing extravagant, just a 3-bedroom with a yard where she could play and walls thick enough that we couldn't hear the neighbors. The day we moved in, I sat on the floor of our empty living room and cried for an hour. Not sad crying, the kind of crying that happens when you've been holding your breath for years and finally remember how to exhale. Naomi was 10, and when I tucked her in that first night, I realized I'd kept my promise to her. Things were different, but I still thought about Brennan Colworth every single morning. Not obsessively, not with revenge consuming my thoughts, but like a reminder. His face was the thing I saw when I wanted to quit, when problems seemed impossible, when growth felt too hard. I'd remember him telling me I'd never belong in his world, and I'd work another hour, land another client, refine another algorithm. Not because I wanted to prove him wrong, but because I'd already proven myself right. By 2017, Fortune 500 companies were competing to work with us. We weren't just optimizing supply chains anymore. We'd evolved into full business intelligence, using AI to transform how companies operated across every department. Our valuation hit $700 million, then $900 million. I was on magazine covers, speaking at conferences, advising CEOs who controlled budgets bigger than some countries. The girl who'd been fired for understanding risk assessments was now the person companies hired to assess and eliminate their risks. In March 2018, my CFO walked into my office with news that made my coffee taste wrong. Colworth Investment Group was struggling badly. Their entire portfolio of companies was underperforming because of operational failures, exactly the kind of failures my company had spent 10 years learning to fix. They'd issued a request for proposal, looking for a firm that could overhaul their operations and save their portfolio. The contract was worth $280 million over 3 years. My board wanted it desperately. This deal would push our valuation past $1 billion. It would make me a billionaire. I sat alone in my office for 3 hours after that meeting, staring at the proposal document. Nobody on my team knew my history with Colworth. They just saw a massive opportunity. But I knew that walking into that building again meant facing the man who'd made me feel worthless. I could decline. We had plenty of other opportunities. We didn't need this specific contract, but something in me needed to close that circle. Not for revenge, but for completion. For proof that the girl he'd dismissed had become someone even he couldn't ignore. The presentation was scheduled for April 12th. I wore a charcoal suit and my grandmother's ring for strength. My team of 18 specialists followed me into that marble lobby, and I felt every ghost of every night I'd spent there. We rode the elevator to the executive floor, and my hands were steady even though my heart was racing. The conference room held 30 people, Colworth's board, his executives, his advisors, and Brennan Colworth himself sitting at the head of the table, older and grayer, but still radiating that same entitled authority. He glanced at me when I walked in, the way you glance at anyone, with no recognition whatsoever. I was just another consultant, another vendor pitching services. My team presented our platform beautifully, showing case studies where we'd saved companies 40 to 60 million annually. The board asked sharp questions, and I answered every one with precision that made them lean forward. Brennan took notes, asked about implementation timelines, questioned our security protocols. He treated me like an equal, like someone worth listening to. It was almost funny. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. Ms. Monroe, your track record is impressive for such a young company. Where did you develop this expertise? I could have given him the sanitized version. Instead, I smiled and said, I actually started developing these skills here, Mr. Colworth. I used to work at Colworth Investment Group about 10 years ago. I watched his pen stop moving. Really? In what department? His tone was friendly, curious, like he was networking. Facilities services. I was part of the night janitorial staff. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. I watched understanding move across Brennan's face, in stages, confusion, then memory, then something that might have been horror. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're the woman from my office, the one who... He stopped, clearly trying to figure out how to finish that sentence in front of 30 witnesses. The one who organized your risk assessment files after accidentally knocking them over? Yes, that was me. The silence was so complete, I could hear the ventilation system humming. Every person in that room was suddenly very interested in their laptops or notebooks, desperate to be anywhere else. Brennan's face had gone pale, and I could see him running calculations, trying to figure out damage control. I let him sit in that discomfort for 5 long seconds before I spoke again. Mr. Colworth, I'm not here to discuss the past. I'm here because your portfolio companies are failing, and my company can fix them. That's what matters. Everything else is irrelevant. But it wasn't irrelevant to him. After my team finished presenting, and the board dismissed us to deliberate, Brennan followed me into the hallway. Ms. Monroe, I need to apologize. What I said to you that night was inexcusable. He struggled, looking for words that might make it better. I was cruel and wrong, and I've thought about that conversation more times than you'd believe. If I could take it back, I cut him off. Mr. Colworth, you can't take it back. And honestly, I don't need you to. What you said was vicious, and it hurt me deeply. But it also lit something on fire. You told me I'd never belong in your world. Instead of believing you, I built my own world and made it bigger than yours. His board approved our contract that afternoon. $280 million. The announcement hit the news the next morning, and the headline was everywhere. From fired janitor to billionaire, Violet Monroe's stunning reversal. Our company valuation crossed $1.3 billion. Phone calls flooded in, interview requests, speaking invitations, partnership proposals. Everyone suddenly wanted to know my story, wanted to touch whatever magic made me succeed. But the number itself felt hollow somehow. Being a billionaire didn't feel like I thought it would. What felt significant was watching our team transform Colworth's portfolio companies, saving them from collapse, while proving that our work had real value. The contract required quarterly reviews, and Brennan attended every single one. At first, he was quiet, just watching our presentations, seeing how we'd improved his company's performance. But by the third review, he started asking genuine questions, engaging with the work in ways that seemed honestly curious rather than defensive. After the 6-month review, he asked to speak with me privately. We stood in a conference room overlooking the city. and the view was the same one he'd had from his office that night. "I need to say this properly," he started. "I was completely wrong about you. You've built something remarkable, and I'm grateful you were willing to work with us, despite how I treated you." I looked at him and realized I'd already forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because carrying that anger had stopped serving me years ago. "Here's what I learned from you, Mr. Colworth. Your doubt pushed me, but it didn't define me. I didn't build Violet Chain to prove you wrong. I built it to prove myself right. That's a crucial difference." I told him how our company operated, how 70% of our 2,000 employees came from overlooked backgrounds, how 5 of my executives had been formally incarcerated, how we recruited from community colleges instead of Ivy League schools, how we'd created something that worked specifically because we didn't follow his rules about who belonged. Brennan listened, really listened, and something shifted in his expression. In the months that followed, he started changing hiring practices at Colworth, began funding scholarships for kids from underprivileged backgrounds, opened mentorship programs. It wasn't redemption. You don't redeem cruelty. But it was growth, and that counted for something. Today, Violet Chain Solutions is valued at $2.8 billion. Naomi is 15 now, and last week she told me she wants to study social entrepreneurship because she wants to build businesses that solve problems for people who get ignored. When I asked her why, she said, "Because you showed me that's what matters. Not the money, but who you help with it." She's smarter than I ever was at her age. People ask me all the time if I'm grateful to Brennan for motivating me. The answer is no. I'm grateful to myself for not believing him. I'm grateful for the version of me that sat crying in a stairwell and decided to get up anyway. I'm grateful for every person who bet on me when I had nothing but ideas and hunger. Brennan's cruelty could have ended my story. I chose to make it the opening chapter instead. Success isn't about revenge. It's not about proving your doubters wrong or rubbing your achievements in anyone's face. Real success is building something meaningful and bringing other people up with you. It's about looking at the person you were and keeping the promises you made to her. The best part of being a billionaire isn't the money. It's knowing that somewhere out there, there's a young woman working 3 jobs and studying at night who'll hear my story and think, if she did it, maybe I can too. That's the real victory. If this story reminded you that your current situation isn't your final destination, hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys of people who refuse to accept other people's limitations. Comment and tell me about a time someone doubted you and how you proved yourself right. Share this with someone who needs to remember their potential. You are not what happened to you. You're what you choose to become next. I'll see you in the next one.